Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Aline Sigler. I am a specialist with Provider Outreach and Education at WPS. Behind the scenes, you've heard from him a little bit. You've seen some stuff he's dropped in the chat for you. We have my friend and coworker, Tom Ryan. Today's session is about, as you can see here in big bold letters, credit balance reporting. This is strictly a Part A function, meaning those facilities and institutional providers that submit claims on the UB04 claim form or the 837I electronic equivalent. So I just want to make sure that everybody's clear on that. Not that this education isn't good to have under your hat, but I don't want you to spend your time listening to this if it doesn't pertain to you. So right off the bat, I want to just clarify that. Couple more housekeeping type things that we need to do before we jump in. We want to invite you to join our training center. On our website, we have a specific area where we post event materials. We usually do that about a week in advance with the holiday and some other backfilled things. This one wasn't out there as soon as it should have been, but that's where you're going to find the PowerPoint presentation if you want to have a copy of the slides that we're using today. And that's on our live events page. It's also where you're going to find out about and register for upcoming educational events. Maybe that's where you went to register for today's training, but sometimes we have people that forward information to us and we're not really sure where it came from. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew where to go to find out about and sign up for upcoming events. Also in our training center, we have recordings. We have encore presentations. And that's where we're going to put the recording of this and other live events. They'll be in that encore presentations area. For anybody who may have had a scheduling contract or conflict, missed the event, wants to listen to it again, anything like that. Depending on the number of events, they'll normally will be available 60 to 90 days. So they kind of transition on and transition off that encore presentations page. You can also find our recordings on our YouTube channel. We know that not everybody can access YouTube on their work computer or during work hours, and so we want you to know that we do have a player embedded on our website where you can still watch those videos. The chat feature, where you're going to add any questions that you have related to today's topic. At the end of our prepared remarks, we'll take as many questions as time allows. Whether you're listening live or you're listening to the encore, we hope you'll give us your feedback by using our survey. These surveys give us insight into how we're doing. And it also gives us topics for education that you want and need in the future. This disclaimer is something that we have in all of our education, and it's to inform you that the information that we're providing is as accurate and up to date to the best of our knowledge as it can be. You know, Medicare is a federal program. It's a fluid program. It changes. It's the beginning of the year. We're seeing a lot of changes, a lot of things that are have moving parts. And so we know that the federal regulations are going to take priority over anything that's in the slideshow or that I happen to say today, but we do our very best to stay on top of all of that. And then finally, we just need you to know that CMS does prohibit recording of our education for profit-making purposes. So this is screenshots. We're already recording it for you, so there really would be no need to do that anyway. So what are we going to talk about? During this session, we're going to start off talking about the requirements for credit balance reporting and why it's important. Then we'll walk through the form itself, and we'll talk about how to complete it. We'll look at the different ways to submit the report, what your options are there. We'll talk about the most recent changes that CMS has made and how they impact you. And then we'll end, like we usually do, to give you resources, places where you can see what we're talking about in black and white, where it says Medicare says that you have to or that you can't do a certain thing. And so that's what we want to end with today. Another thing about Medicare, acronyms. You can count on them. We don't ever call anything by its real name. It is usually an acronym. Number one, because a lot of the terms are long and there's not a lot of room on our individual slides, but it just makes it easier. And it makes it easier if you're familiar with them. If you're not familiar with them, we want to define them for you, but then also refer you back to where you can read what the actual definition is until you do become more familiar with them. So just wanted to give you those as a reference. So let's begin by looking at how CMS defines a credit balance and then find out what's expected from a reporting aspect for you in regards to them. A credit balance is an improper or excess payment made to a provider as a result of patient billing or claims processing errors. And this slide contains some of the examples of Medicare credit balances, and it includes instances where you might be paid twice for the same service, so duplicate payments. And this could be either by Medicare or by Medicare and another payer. It might be instances where you're paid for services that were planned but not performed for some reason or another. It might also be that you were paid for non-covered services. Yes, we have lots of different billing edits in place for items and services that Medicare doesn't pay for, but you can't just bill everything to Medicare and hope the system catches it. That's not the right way to go about it. So sometimes we realize that while another insurance may pay for it, Medicare doesn't, and so you need to be, billing that a little bit differently. If it's something that Medicare does cover, but maybe just not for your specific patient in this instance, there is some specific billing requirements that are made for those instances too. A credit balance could be an overpayment because of errors made in calculating beneficiary deductible or coinsurance amounts. Again, we're at the beginning of a year. The rates changed at the beginning of the year. And if your software wasn't updated in time or something like that, maybe your accounting system is calculating the amount due from a patient incorrectly. Mistakes happen. It could also be an instance where a hospital that bills and is paid for outpatient services that should have been included in the beneficiary's inpatient claim due to hospital bundling, due to the 3-day payment window, instances like that. So all of these are examples of what might be considered a credit balance as far as Medicare's definition. So where are those regulations? Where can you go to see that I'm just not making this up? Well, we're going to go all the way back to the Social Security Act. It requires participating providers to furnish information about payments made to them. And then it also goes on to state that you are required to refund any monies incorrectly paid. I included the section that I'm referring to here on this slide here, so you can also go back and look at it. I've also included on a resources slide, which if you haven't downloaded the slide deck or you've downloaded it but you haven't looked through it yet, there is a slide towards the end of the presentation where I've listed some of these different resources, and we'll look at that after a while. So in accordance with these provisions within the Social Security Act, all providers participating in the Medicare program are to complete a Medicare credit balance report to help ensure that monies owed to Medicare are repaid and repaid in a timely manner. The CMS 838 is the official form that's specifically used to monitor identification and recovery of those credit balances, which for purposes of completing the CMS 838, a Medicare credit balance is an amount that's determined to be refundable to the Medicare program. So starting off with defining what a credit balance is, then what the specific form or method of reporting it is, and then where in the regulations can you find more about this. So that's where we wanted to start with today. So that is just a very brief, high-level overview there. So as a Medicare provider, you're responsible for using that 838 form to notify Medicare about credit balances. This includes the number and the amount of credit balances. It's also going to explain the reason for the credit balance, such as if it's a duplicate payment, or if there's another insurance that's primary to Medicare and is responsible for the charges. Submitting the 838 is an important part of ensuring that you're compliant with those Medicare billing regulations within the Social Security Act. So now we're going to look at the specifics of the report itself. The 838, again, that's the official claim number or claim form, consists of two parts, a certification page, and it has to be signed and dated by an officer. So this would be maybe your chief financial officer or your chief executive officer, or it could be the administrator of your facility. The second part is the details page, and that requires specific information about the individual claims that have caused the credit balance or credit balances, if there's more than one. CMS does require a separate report for inpatient and outpatient claims. So I just want to make sure that you're clear there as well. So let's take a look at each of these different elements. And we'll start with the certification page. So this is a screenshot of the certification page of the credit balance report form as it's downloaded from the CMS website. I have included a link to it on your resources slide. I know we haven't talked about submission methods yet, but if you submit yours electronically, the form that you use may look a little bit different. However you do that, though, the fields should be very similar, and you should capture all of the same information. So if your software vendor has a form built into it, or you use the form that is on our secure portal, you know, it's going to look a little bit different than this, but the fields are going to closely follow the form that's on the CMS website. And again, it's going to capture all the same information. Excuse me. Okay, so let's take a closer look at that. The certification page contains all the items that you see listed here. So what I'm going to do, let me go back for just one second. I'm going to start at the top with the fields that are required. I'm just going to work my way down the page. So the first thing that we need is the provider's name, the PTAN, the Provider Transaction Access Number, your Medicare number, the calendar quarter ending date, the officer or administrator's name, title, and signature. We also need the date the report was completed. You also need to select the box indicating that a detail page or pages is attached. And I know this might be hard to see on your screen. Whenever you do a screenshot, especially if you're doing the whole page, it's a little hard to see. But on the form itself, you can see that there are two other boxes. And I know that we haven't talked about this yet, but your quarterly credit balance reports are no longer required. So you don't have to submit those every quarter, only if you actually have a credit balance to notify us of. So those other two boxes are kind of a moot point at this point in time. And then the last bullet here, we also need a name and a telephone number of a contact person. Now, we realize that in most cases, this is probably going to be someone totally different than the officer or administrator who signs the certification page, and that's okay, because your CFO, your administrator, your CEO are probably not the same people that are doing the billing and the claims processing and the billing office duties, and we realize that. So that's what's needed on the certification page. So here's a glimpse of the detail page. Again, keep in mind that this is the standard form. I downloaded it from the CMS website. The one provided by your software vendor or even in the portal is going to look a little bit different. I'm showing you the whole page, and I know it's hard to see again, but we're going to break it down and we're going to zoom in a little closer in the next few slides. So we're going to pinpoint exactly what information is on this page. So we're going to start by completing the information in the heading area. So I'm going to go down the left side and then the right side. We need the full name of the facility and the facility's provider number. Now, just a note here about the provider number. If you have multiple provider numbers within your facility, let's say for dedicated units within your facility, I'm thinking hospitals here, such as swing beds, psychiatric or rehab units, complete a separate credit balance report for each provider number. We also need the month, day, and year of the reporting quarter. Then you're going to indicate an A if it's for Part A credit balances, or a B if it reflects the Part B credit balances. Remember, way back at the beginning, I stated that credit balance reporting is only for Part A providers. So when we say Part B here, it only pertains to services you provide which are billed on a UBO4. So you're billing them to Part A on a UBO4, but the money is coming from the Part B trust fund. So I just want to make that clear. We might have people that are new to Medicare, just learning about this and not really sure about the differences there. So we're specifically talking about facility or institutional charges here. It does not pertain to physician and supplier services. So that takes care of the left column in the header section. Let's move over then to the right. First, we need you to tell us the number of the current page and then the total number of details pages that you're sending. This is important because, especially if you are mailing it or faxing it, we want to make sure that there were no pages missing, lost, accidentally attached to a different credit balance report, whatever the case may be. So you're going to have page 1 of 1 or 1 of 3 or 2 of 3 or whatever. But it's just counting the details page. Don't count the certification page, just those details pages. And then finally, we need the name and telephone number of an individual who can be contacted regarding any questions about the report or the report data. Hang on a second, Aline. You know, you just told us that we need to do this on the certification page. Why do we have to do it here? Well, remember that you used to have to send credit balance reports quarterly, regardless of whether you had any credit balances to report. So we needed to capture it on the certification page anyway, because you always had to send that. But since there's been recent changes in those reporting requirements, I fully expect that the form will be revised, but until it does, that information goes in both places. And it's totally up to your facility as to who you want to be the contact for your facility. So now let's start going left to right on the main portion of the details page. And if you're not familiar, and I know it's kind of hard to see, but the columns are all numbered. Column 1 is the last name and first initial of the Medicare beneficiary. Column 2 is the beneficiary's MBI, Medicare Beneficiary Identifier, their Medicare number, what used to be known as their HIC number. Column 3 is where you'll put the ICN, internal control number, that's assigned when the claim is processed. So just a quick note here also, when a credit balance is the result of a duplicate payment, report the data pertaining to the most recently paid claim. That way we will have the information, and if we need to do the adjustment, we make sure that we set it up off the correct one. Column 4 is the type of bill. As Part A providers, you're familiar with a type of bill. 111 for an inpatient hospital, 131 for an outpatient hospital, 851 for outpatient critical access hospital, and so on. Columns 5 and 6 are for the month, day, and year the beneficiary was admitted and discharged, you know, if it's an inpatient claim, or the from and through dates for outpatient services. Moving on to the next set of data, column 7 is the month, day, and year that the claim was paid. Again, if credit balance is caused by a duplicate payment, ensure the paid date and the ICN correspond to the most recent payment. In column 8, add an O, and that's an O, not a 0, O for open cost reporting period. Then, or you're going to put a C for closed if the cost reporting period is closed. I know this isn't what we're covering today, but just to clarify, an open cost report is one where a notice of program reimbursement, or NPR, has not been issued yet. Don't consider a cost report open if it was reopened for a specific issue, you know, such as graduate medical education or malpractice insurance. Column 9 is where you're going to put the amount of the Medicare credit balance, and that's determined by your patient or accounting records. Column 10 is the amount of the credit balance that's identified in column 9 that's being repaid with the submission of the report. Next up is column 11. This is the method of payment. You're going to use a C if you're submitting a check. So C for check. If you're sending a check along with your 838 form to repay the amount that's shown in column 9. You're going to use an A for adjustment. So if your adjustment is being submitted in hard copy for a debit credit to satisfy the credit balance, you're going to use an A. You're going to use a Z in that column if payment's being made by a combination of check and hard copy adjustment. Or you're going to use an X. An X indicates an adjustment bill's already been submitted, either electronically or hard copy. Column 12 is for the amount of the credit balance that remains outstanding. So column 9 minus column 10. That should be 0 if you made full payment with your 838 or claim adjustments already been submitted and has been fully processed to recoup the credit balance. Column 13 is where you tell us the reason for the credit balance. Enter a 1 if it's the result of a duplicate payment, 2 if it's the result of a primary payment by another insurer, or 3 if it's other. And if you use other, make sure that you add an explanation so that we know the reason for that overpayment. All right, rounding out this details page. If you used a 2 in column 13, columns 14 and 15 is where you're going to give us additional information. So column 14 is the value code that matches the type of insurance that made the primary payment. If you bill Medicare secondary payer claims, these are the same value codes you use when reporting primary payments on your UBO4s. I included a couple common ones here on the slide, but there are others, 13 for end-stage renal disease, 15 for workers' compensation, 47 for liability insurance, and so on. Column 15 is for the name and address of the primary payer who identified by you in column 14. So that's a summary of the columns on that detailed page of that 838 credit balance report form. Since we ended with instances related to primary payers, I want to talk just a little bit more about that. I want to reiterate some rules for MSP just to make sure that you remain in compliance. Medicare can be tricky. It can be very tricky sometimes. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. MSP regulations in the Code of Federal Regulations, specifically 42 CFR 489.20, subsection H, requires you to pay Medicare within 60 days from the date that you receive payment from another insurance, one that's primary to Medicare. Submission of the 838 and its instructions don't interfere with this 60-day rule. You have to repay credit balances resulting from MSP payments within the 60-day period. Stressing that. That 60 days isn't, impacted by a credit balance report. So if they haven't been repaid by the last day of the reporting quarter, then go ahead and put them on the 838 form. If you identify and repay an MSP credit balance within a reporting quarter and it's within the 60-day requirement, then there's no need to include it on the 838 because it's no longer a credit balance at that point. You've already repaid it. You've already taken care of it. We encourage you to continue to adjust and take care of overpayments as soon as they're identified, and don't wait and hold them for the credit balance report. So what are your options for submitting the report when you've identified that a credit balance exists and you need to tell Medicare about it? By far, the fastest and most efficient way is through our website. We call it the Secure Net Access Portal, or SNAP. But the report can also be faxed or mailed. And I've included the fax number here, but we'll talk a little bit more about each of these different submission options. That's what we're going to do next. If you need to send a credit balance report, sending it electronically in SNAP is the preferred method. If you're not a registered user of our secure portal, if you've been hesitant to sign up, if you weren't sure that it was worth the trouble for you, submitting your credit balances is just one of the many tasks that you can get done quickly and easily. So I do encourage you to reconsider. It's also completely free, so that's a plus too. If you're interested and you weren't aware, I am hosting a webinar tomorrow on this very subject. We're going to walk step by step through the process of submitting your credit balance in the portal. If you're listening to this education as a recording, look for the video that's titled Encore, Submitting the Credit Balance Report in SNAP. I'll link to it in the description of this video once the Encore comes out, so you can look for it there as well. Right now, though, you get the abbreviated version. So from your home page, once you've logged into the portal, you're going to navigate to the practice section or the practice tile on your home page. And then you're going to use the plus sign beside the credit balance report button. And I've included a screenshot here. So when you go to that practice tile, you're going to see credit balance report, and you're probably going to be inclined to click on it because that's what we do. The words are the link, right? But I've highlighted it here with a red box. You want to use that plus button. Plus means to add. We're going to add a new credit balance report. If you click on the other button, the credit balance report button, that will let you look at previously submitted credit balance reports, check the status of them and whatnot. And so I just wanted to make sure that you knew the difference between them. And we do have a portal user manual that you can go to get more detailed information. Again, now that you're not required to submit these quarterly, when one comes up and you do need to submit a report, you might have to refresh yourself, and that portal manual can walk you through that. This slide then contains the addresses to use if you'll be sending your credit balance report by postal mail or a delivery service. So if you're sending it certified mail, you're using UPS, FedEx, some other courier, you want to make sure that you're using the correct address and that it's formatted correctly so it gets to the right place. You know, the addresses are different within different departments, different jurisdictions. So no matter what you're sending, make sure the address is correct. Not doing this can result in delays, lost communications, cause rework, missed timelines, and we just don't want that to happen. It's also imperative for delivery services to have the correct street address because the government services mail needs to be separate from the WPS Health Solutions or the corporate side. Their mail is processed differently, goes to different places, different people, and so that's why I have added them here. We also have this listed on our website, so you can always refer back to it. And then, like I've alluded to already today, there have been some recent changes to the reporting requirements for credit balances, and that's our next topic of discussion here. So, if you've been around a while, you know that Part A providers had to send credit balance reports quarterly, even if you had no credit balances to report during the quarter. You had to send a separate one for each PTAN and a separate one for inpatient and outpatient claims. If we didn't receive the report within 30 days following the end of the quarter, your payments were withheld until we did. It took time for you, it took time for us, and that was time and money that could be spent doing other tasks. So it's been a long time coming, but this has now been changed. And so I just want to make sure that everybody is aware that this has changed. It changed as of December 1st, 2024. Mandatory quarterly credit balance reports are no longer required. The credit balance report process itself isn't going away, but you only have to send a credit balance if a credit balance exists. As I stated before, we encourage you to continue to adjust and take care of overpayments as soon as they're identified. And I know that you do that. The majority of our providers do that. Over 90% of the 838s that we were getting had zero amounts to report. Now, if you're not able to adjust your claim, you know, maybe it's too old, it's due to its age, or the adjustment isn't processing correctly, report it to us so that we can get it taken care of. We have an online form that's called the Overpayment Notification Refund Form. We have that. I've linked to it here on this slide. It's on our website. You can use that if you want to. You don't have to hold, and please don't hold overpayments for the credit balance report. Now this slide, this is the one I was talking about earlier. This has some resources that are related to credit balance reports. This is where you can find out more about the things that we've talked about today. The first one is this section of the Social Security Act that states you have to make arrangements to return any monies incorrectly collected from an individual or another person. Next is the Medicare Financial Management Manual. So this is publication 100-06. This is one that you might not use as often. You know, we are, as billers, I'm assuming, we are more used to using 100-2, the Medicare Benefit Policy Manual, 100-4, the Medicare Claims Processing Manual. But this is where you can find instructions for Medicare credit balance report activities, 100-6, and specifically Chapter 12. It outlines the requirements for credit balance reporting for providers, but MACs also. The third resource here is the actual 838 form itself, as well as the instructions. Then I've listed an educational article from the WPS website. It also contains the submission guidelines and the contact information. And then finally, the portal user manual, as I mentioned earlier, that's going to walk you through how to submit the credit balance report in SNAP. So a couple things that I want to show you real quick is, because I know we don't have time to look at all of these, I want to go to the actual 838 form itself on the CMS website. It'll take just a second to jump out there. And I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't up for revision soon, just based on the changes. So here's the certification page that I showed you. Gave you a screenshot in the event that we couldn't get out to the website or anything like that. But I think it's always better to look at it live. And then it goes into the detail page. It has space for 13 different claims if you were to have that many overpayments identified that you needed to report. But you can add as many of these pages as you need to. And then it goes into the instructions. On some of the forms on CMS's website, the form and the instructions are on different pages, but this one is all together. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew where that was, and if you've downloaded a copy of the PowerPoint, you have that link. Also, on the WPS website, remember this is a Part A function. So if you come out here and you're in the Part B side, let me just switch real quick, you'll get a message telling you that it only pertains to Part A. It's a Part A function. So here's where I was talking about. Here's the fax number, here's the different mailing addresses, and then also, if you have questions, contact customer service. J5 and J8 have different phone numbers. I just happen to be in J5 MAC Part A. And then also, if you have questions, there is an email address. Do not use that email address to actually submit your reports. That's not correct. It's a PII risk. Don't do that. But it's another option where you can get general questions answered. And then it explains a little bit more about that. So always want to give you resources where you can go to get more information. Now I want to check in with Tom. I want to see, since I'm sharing my screen and sharing the PowerPoint, I can't see what's going on in the chat. So I want to check in with Tom to see if you have any questions related to today's topic. Just know that anything that's claim specific or specific to a certain credit balance report, those will have to go to customer service. And if we run out of time for questions, you'll have another opportunity to send those in. So, Tom, what have we gotten for questions?
The first one, and I know that you've said it a couple of times, but you just might want to reiterate it, is when did the change that we didn't have to file quarterly occur?
Yeah, that's a great question. That was effective as of December 1st. If I remember, we actually got the official communication on or around December 17th. It was part of, if I remember rightly, part of a weekly listserv communication that came from CMS, but it was effective December 1st, 2024.
Perfect. Next question. Are you expecting this form to be filled out every time there's a credit that is returned? I was told by the FI that the credit balance report was no longer needed as long as this claim was canceled or corrected MSP claim was submitted.
And that's right. You know what I said when I said, if you identify an overpayment and you do either a cancel claim or a debit credit adjustment right away to return that, and it's taken care of, then there would be no need for the credit balance report. But CMS recognizes that there are times where, for whatever reason, the adjustment can't be done, and then at the end of that quarter, you do have a credit balance outstanding. And so the report is still valid and active for that, but just know that there are other avenues that you can pursue before the credit balance report. So I hope that helps.
All right, next question. How are we supposed to know if the cost reporting period is open or closed?
Oh, that's a good question. Since we don't do the cost reports in the claims area, somebody at your facility is submitting those. So in every organization, that could look a little bit different. So I would ask around in your business office or at your facility and find out who that contact person is, and they could give you more information on that.
Macy, Aline just answered this question, so you're giving me some more detail just on the email and et cetera, the information that you received. If you still have questions, could you please put some more back in the chat? I know that Aline did just answer that, so I don't want to try to have her go all the way back through that again. So again, if you do have more questions, please put it in the chat. Aline, can you show where to locate this form again? A few people, two people are having issues with it. They are saying that they did clear their cookies and cache, but they're still getting some different messages, and they are different messages. So if you wouldn't mind, just show them where to locate that form again.
Sure, absolutely. So within our PowerPoint, I've linked to it. But if you look at the actual URL here, if you go to cms.gov, under Medicare, under the forms, let's see if we can walk through that. Sorry for my typing. Plucking with one finger. We go to Medicare. We're looking for forms and notices. I thought there was a search tool, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put 838 just because I happen to know that that's the form number on the CMS website. Should come right up for you, and you can download it right there. If you still have trouble, let us know, send us an email, and we can send you a link, but the link within the PowerPoint is working for me, so hopefully it'll work for you too.
All right, again, please make sure that you've cleared your cookies, your cache. If you need to try a different internet browser, any of those things, if it does persist, you will need to contact your IT department. That's not something we can help you with. Next question, column 13. If I use a 3 other, should I put my note in column 15?
That would be fine. If there is other documentation that you need to send along with it, I can't think of a specific example that you would need that for, but anything that would help describe why that credit balance occurred would be helpful, and you can send it along with it.
Next question, so maybe we as Part B do not use it, and they're talking about the form.
Yeah, if you're a Part B provider and you bill on a CMS 1500 claim form, this credit balancing report process does not apply to you.
Next question, do we report credits that Medicare has already been notified of?
Once you notify Medicare of a credit balance, either on the credit balance report itself or some other way, then no, it does not need to be put on a credit balance report.
Next question, if you submit a credit balance report through SNAP, then no certification report is required to be signed by an administrator, and that's a question mark.
We'll talk about that tomorrow when we go into submitting the form in SNAP. Now, if you can attend tomorrow, I understand, but there is instructions in the portal user manual because you can electronically sign it, and by doing it in the portal, which you have to log in to be able to do, you're attesting to the same fact. So it's capturing the same requirements, just in a different way.
Just to confirm that if we have credits to report, we are still reporting them on a quarterly basis, right?
If you have credit balances to report at the end of the quarter and you haven't adjusted them, you haven't paid Medicare back some other way, then yes.
Aline, can you go over what open and closed means again?
Yes. Yeah, let me go back to that part. Take me just 1 second here. To find it. if a cost report is open, that means a notice of program reimbursement, or NPR, has not been issued. So it means that you've submitted the cost report, someone's taken a look at it, and they've made the determination as to what is due back to the Medicare program, if anything. So if you haven't received that notice of program reimbursement yet, your cost report may still be open. But again, I wouldn't know that. The claims area may not know that because that's done through our audit and reimbursement department. And so again, there's somebody at your facility or in your office that's submitting them and is keeping track of them. So I would recommend you connect with them.
All right, our next question is, how far back can you actually put a credit on a credit balance report?
As soon as it's identified. I guess that's the deciding factor. When did you identify that there was an overpayment due to the Medicare program? And as soon as you identified it, did you do an adjustment? Did you cancel the claim? Whatever the case may be. We always recommend, if you can satisfy that overpayment instead of sending a paper check, we would always prefer that you do that. That way the check gets applied to the right account, the right claim, the right provider number, etc.
I think this is in response to the Part B provider question, but can Part B providers use this form anyway?
No, there would be no need to. We have other methods of overpayments, and you can find information about that on our website.
So the next question, so if we cancel or adjust, then we don't need to file the report?
Correct, because once you do the cancel, you do the adjustment, you've repaid the money electronically through that debit credit process to Medicare, then it's no longer an overpayment, it's no longer a credit balance on the.
And does it matter if that credit or that cancel or adjustment is still in process at the end of the quarter?
Unless you foresee some kind of system error with it, no, it'll process before that report's ever received, so there would be no need to.
All right, that was our last question.
Great. I really appreciate all your questions today. Those are great, because a lot of times if you have a question, other people have the question also, and so it just helps everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. We have just a couple minutes left, and I do have some closing remarks for you. First thing, in a few minutes, you're going to receive an email, and that email is going to come from the WebEx webinar tool. And what that's going to do is, number one, it's going to thank you for attending. And we want to make sure that you don't delete it before you read it, because the email, and we've kind of given you an example here on the left, and we've highlighted a couple things. Because number one, what it's going to do is it's going to give you an opportunity to take the survey, a different opportunity to take the survey. But it also contains your certificate of achievement. If you need contact hours for continuing education units, this email is what you're going to save or upload to your accrediting body for consideration of CEUs. If you don't see that email in the next 10 to 15 minutes, check your junk or spam folder. You're going to be looking for an email from WebEx. So we just want to make sure that you don't delete it before you read that. If you're listening to this education as an encore, we want to thank you for tuning in to learn more about the Medicare program. However, we don't have your email address and we can't verify that you attended the entire event, so we really have no way of sending those contact hours to you, and a certificate would not be possible. If you think of additional questions, you have 1 week from today, 1 week from the live webinar to submit a follow-up question. Send them to our same education mailbox, and I've listed that email address here. In the subject line, something about credit balances. That way all those emails will get sent directly to me and I can respond to them for you. Anything claim specific, anything related to a specific credit balance report has to go to customer service. Please take a few minutes to complete a survey about this course. Tell us what you liked, what we could do better. There's always room for improvement. And give us suggestions for topics for future education. So you have a few different options here depending on your preference. I already showed you a link to the survey in your thank you for attending email that you're going to get. We have a link in the chat you can use once the webinar is over. When you exit the webinar, you're going to be asked to go to an external site. And that external site is the CMS Qualtrics page for the survey. The message is going to look kind of like this picture on the right. It's going to have this triangle. It's going to say external site. It's going to have the blue continue button. Now, when you first get this, you may not know what it is, especially if this is the first webinar that you've attended of ours. We don't have the liberty of changing the verbiage here. And so we just want to explain that it's safe, it's nothing bad. You just click that blue continue button and it starts the survey for you. If you're listening to this as an encore, you're going to have a different option. You're going to scroll down into the description of the video. There's going to be a link there. But at the very end of the video, there's going to be a picture that looks like this here with the hand and the finger and the stars. And that's going to be a link to the survey as well. Let us know if you'd recommend our education to others. And how likely are you to attend other events that we host? These surveys are so important to WPS and CMS because it gives us insight into the types of education that you find most beneficial. Not that we think you'll find beneficial, but you actually tell us what you want education on. On behalf of myself, Tom, all of us in Provider Outreach and Education, I want to thank you for your attention today. Thank you for those great questions and for participating. I know that your time is valuable. I know that you're busy, and so thanks for spending a few minutes with us today. We hope you'll join us for future education, and we look forward to your survey comments. You may now disconnect.